So, I want to do a series looking at every hero in AFK Journey, and I want to talk a little bit about what they're used for, how they scale, whether you should invest in them, all the kind of good stuff that you want to know about with specific heroes. And I thought that no one's really doing this in terms of individual heroes. Someone actually mentioned it in my comments, and I thought it was a really good idea. So we're going to start off with one of my favorite characters in the game, the character that you are guaranteed in your first 10 pulls, which is Cecia. And I think she's a good place to start because most people are going to be using Cecia when they start the game. And so I thought, let's talk about Cecia, let's talk about what she does, her abilities, and talk about where she's useful. And then I'll also show you kind of, for someone who's at like level 100 at the Trial of Abyss towers, where Cecia still remains useful as the game progresses. So let's jump straight into it. In terms of lore, there's not much to go from. Cecia is, like most Graveborn, ex-Lightbearer, and is undead. She clearly has some kind of wilder magic going for her. She uses a lot of thorns, and it does say as part of one of her lore bites that Mr. Carlisle, which is her ultimate, which we'll talk about in a moment, gives off a vaguely wilder-like presence. So, undead mage, so Graveborn mage, but technically a marksman because she fires thorns, but has lots of magic and gives like wilder type magic presence. So it feels like she's a Graveborn that kind of uses wilder magic. Now, speaking of her abilities, let's get into it. Her first one is Queen's Summons. This is her iconic ultimate ability. This is what makes her useful for pretty much the entire campaign and makes her relatively useful in the late game. Cecia summons Mr. Carlisle, and Mr. Carlisle inherits all of Cecia's stats, and his normal attacks deal 170% damage of Cecia's attack to all enemies within a one-tile arc. So, in terms of arc, essentially, there is a small 3-arc section in front of Mr. Carlisle. He swipes, so imagine there's 3 tiles in front like this. He swipes those 3 tiles in an arc. He gains 45% extra of Cecia's max HP, but loses 4% of his max HP per second. If he's still alive, when this is recast, he'll regain all of his HP. And when he is cast, he initiates Tangled Agony within enemies within 2 tiles, dealing 140% of Cecia's attack damage per second for 2 seconds. The summoned enemies cannot move or act, so it's not simply immobilized, they are essentially stunned. And by leveling him up, the first level grants him an extra 15% max HP, or at least an extra 60% HP. I'm not sure if that is going from 45% to 60% or an extra 60% on top of what he already has. Sometimes it's not clear. And then essentially after that, it's just increasing his normal attack damage by a small amount every time. That is the iconic ability. And one of the good things about this ability, as you can see here, it is global. You can cast it wherever you want on the field. And that essentially means you have complete freedom about where you place this. This is what makes this such a devastating backline ability. Earth's Offering. Cecia gains power from the earth to increase hers and Mr. Carlisle's attack speed by 45 seconds. By 45 for 8 seconds. And leveling this up increases attack speed by 50. And then level 3, this is where it gets really good. Mr. Carlisle's next normal attack will be replaced by Thundering Quake, dealing 320% damage to all enemies. Surrounding enemies within 2 tiles, and he gains 15 life drain. That's a very powerful ability, and you will see once you get this unlocked, this will massively increase her backline disruption. Agonizing Puncture. Passive. Cecia and Mr. Carlisle gain 20 defense penetration, so that's 20 defense penetration straight up, and Cecia's next normal attack is enhanced after she uses 3 normal attacks, dealing 220% of her attack damage. Cecia's defense penetration from this passive effect is increased to 25, and then the attack damage just goes up every level. So this gives her 20 defense penetration overall, which actually makes her decent on boss fights, even though she's not the best on boss fights. If you have her highly ascended, a lot of people use her for Dream Realm simply because she is highly ascended and she has this natural inbuilt defense penetration. What's worth noting is this is only defense penetration for Cecia and Mr. Carlisle's damage. You'll notice that Cecia and Mr. Carlisle are treated as different objects a lot of the time. But essentially, it doesn't mean that it reduces the target's defense. It just means that all of her damage ignores 20 defense. Cecia increases her, and also it's worth noting that is flat defense penetration. It's not percentage defense penetration as you get with some of the abilities. This is just flat, which makes it much better versus lower HP targets, which is why she's very good, or lower defense targets, which is why she's very good at dealing with backline. So her hero focus, she increases her attack speed and gains an extra 9 attack speed when Mr. Carlisle is on the battlefield. Remember, Mr. Carlisle inherits all of Cecia's stats, so the more attack speed that Cecia gets, the more that Mr. Carlisle gets. And Trial of Thorns is her exclusive weapon. Cecia entangles an enemy with reinforced thorns, dealing 60% damage every second. The target cannot move or act for 4 seconds. Cecia absorbs 1.5% physical defense and magic defense from the target every second. The absorbed stats last until the battle ends and are also shared by Mr. Carlisle. So essentially, she's granting herself and Mr. Carlisle more tankiness. Cecia can only absorb each target up to 8 times. This essentially means that for boss fights, she can only do this up to 8 times. This skill prioritizes enemies who have not reached the limit or are not in control immunity status. The important X upgrade level for her, and I'm going to show you the X upgrade now, if I can just jump to it. The important X upgrade level for her is essentially 5. You only increase the damage that you take per second at 10 and 15, and frankly, that is very surplus to requirements. Getting it to X level 5 absorbs 1 of the target's vitality each time when stealing stats, which is really nice. That increases HP and also reduces HP of the target that she is absorbing from. So that's very nice as well. So getting it to X level 5 is the sweet spot for Cecia. And then we have her Enhanced Force. The required normal attacks to trigger Agonized Puncture is reduced to 1. So essentially, Agonizing Puncture is after she uses 3 normal attacks, it reduces to 1. So basically, every other basic attack, she is going to deal 220% of her normal attack damage, which is very good. So where is Cecia useful? And should you upgrade Cecia? Well, the honest answer is it's up to you. If you want to min-max on your wish list, then Cecia shouldn't be on your wish list, because ultimately, if you want to min-max and really go for like the ultimate late game wish list, it should be Carolina and Thorin. Now, Thorin and I have the luxury of Thorin and Cecia already being maxed for me, but I did sacrifice a lot of potential Carolina pulls or Carolina pulls because I have Cecia on my list and I maxed her. I only have 1 copy of Carolina, so I'm so far away from having her at Mythic Plus that I am, you know, in the realm of nowhere at this point in time. So it's really up to you. What I would say about Cecia is that all the way through all of the AFK stages, I used her a lot. There were some stages where I used the Mauler Cheese team, which we'll talk about when we do other characters, but for the most part, I used Cecia like 95% of the time. And for pretty much the entire story, I used Cecia in every single battle. She is extremely strong early, mid, and even has her position in the late game. But getting you through the story, getting you through AFK stages, for them, like most of them anyway, and doing decently in PvP, Dream Realm, and all that, she is excellent for those types of things. People still use her quite frequently in Arena as well. Now, I don't anymore because we'll talk about the disadvantages of Cecia in a minute, but I don't use her a huge amount in Arena at the moment. But you can still see that even here at the sort of top end of Arena on my level, which is very, very sort of relatively high level stuff. Even I was using Cecia until I switched up my composition. I'm actually going to switch up my composition now, just while we're here. If you give me 2 seconds, Damien, and then this guy. This person doesn't have a Valor, so that's fine. So people are still using Cecia because she's quite highly ascended, and she does, if she's able to cast, do a lot of damage on the backline. You know, one of the weaknesses, frankly, of Cecia, when she has just cast here on the backline, one of the weaknesses of Cecia, though, just tends to be, is she going to cast? And that's what we'll talk about when it comes to, yeah, like I said, some of the weaknesses of Cecia, which we will talk about soon. So obviously didn't do well here, even though she did cast. It's just because I'm running quite a meta-ish composition. I'm using like the Iron comp, which is very meta. But Cecia is still used frequently by a lot of people. And up until very recently, I was also using her in PvP. And I do also frequently use her in Dream Realm. And I used her all the way through AFK stages. So Cecia has a lot of strength in that regard. In terms of when she starts to fall off, and some of her weaknesses are more apparent the later that you go. When you're going up against very big power discrepancies, you often just don't have the time to wait for Cecia to cast her ultimate. That is the biggest issue with Cecia in general, is that she requires a lot of energy to essentially cast her ultimate, and that's one of the things that you will find draws Cecia back compared to some of her other counterparts, is that she requires a lot of energy and is very reliant on things like Rowan in PvP and late game team comps. And the problem with Rowan is he's a light bearer, and you don't often run many other light bearers, so you sometimes lose faction bonuses. So she kind of requires Rowan to be effective in the later stages of the game. And so that's one of the major issues with Cecia, and that's one of the things that many people will tell you about Cecia, is that even though she is very strong, she's got great global presence on the map, she's very good at disrupting and killing backline, it often takes too long for her to actually cast her ultimate. And because she is so ultimate reliant, unlike some other characters which have got a lot more varied and useful skills, Cecia is very ultimate reliant to do the majority of her damage. Most of her abilities also buff Mr. Carlisle, and so therefore having no Mr. Carlisle on the field, you are missing over half of her kit. And so that is the major issue with Cecia. However, I do still use her in the late game, and this is what I'm going to show you now. I'm going to show you some instances of Cecia in action so you can kind of see where she is useful and what she is used for. So it's important to talk about the heroes that Cecia works well with, and that's what I'm going to go through and do now. The first of which I'm just going to go through is on my screen, is Thorin. The reason Cecia synergizes well with Thorin is not because their kits are particularly good together, it's more that they're just both Graveborn, and Thorin is the best tank in the game. So you're going to get a faction activation bonus a lot of the time, the 2 faction activation bonus that you can slot with 3 from another faction. There aren't many other good PvE Graveborn heroes, maybe except Sylvina. The problem with Sylvina, though, is when she's underleveled, she sucks. So especially when you're going up in power level, Sylvina is not a particularly good addition to the team. So yeah, you'll find that this is sometimes a nice little 2 addition that you can add into a team comp, especially if you're running like 3 Wilders, for instance, or 3 Maulers. You're going to get a nice addition to the overall faction bonus. And that's why Cecia works quite well with Thorin, because he's just another good Graveborn. And there aren't many other good Graveborns for PvE right now. The next is Florabelle. And I'm not doing these in like order of how important they are to her. They're just the order they're on my screen. The Florabelle one is very simple. It's usually when she's Mythic Plus. You will not get much benefit from running Florabelle with Cecia before Mythic Plus. Essentially, it grants Mr. Carlisle a shield when he is summoned to the battlefield. Now, this shield does not take damage from Mr. Carlisle's natural HP degeneration. It does block purely from attacks, so you'll notice that the shield moves down with the HP bar when Mr. Carlisle is on the field and is otherwise not receiving damage. The nice thing, though, is at level 10, Florabelle grants the summon with the highest attack, 27 haste, and life drain with 32, which makes Mr. Carlisle very strong. Now, I'm going to assume that Mr. Carlisle has the most attack. It doesn't actually say what the individual attack inheritance of the petal plums or whatever they are called, the summons from Florabelle. It doesn't say what their attack is, but Spiny gets inherited, goes onto the field when it starts. He deals 60% of damage. And then there is Smashy, which deals 120% with normal attacks. Unfortunately, it just doesn't say what their actual attack stats are. So it's difficult. It's difficult for me to say. Now, at this current state, because I have an X weapon 10 on Florabelle, her attack is actually currently higher than Cecia's attack. So Cecia's attack is about 2k lower, but obviously Cecia has 5 less X weapons. So naturally, Cecia, at an equal level, would have higher attack than Florabelle. So often Mr. Carlisle will be the beneficiary of that buff as well. So that's also something that's worth noting. Probably the number 1 best hero synergy is Rowan. And you'll find that a lot of people say that you kind of need Rowan to run Cecia in the late game. I would say that's quite true, especially in PvP, primarily because his energy battery just gives her the ability to cast. Without it, she does take a long time in a fight to cast. And what you will find in late game PvE and PvP is you just don't have a lot of time. Your tanks melt when you're going up 100, like a 100 level deficit in the Trials of Abyss. Like, your tanks just melt. So you don't really have the time to cast, so you kind of need to run Rowan. So Cecia and Rowan are a tried and tested combo that works a lot. The other sort of one that really comes to mind. They're the couple that come to mind. Iron, and that's obviously great when he why is it saying new? What have I got that's new here, guys? It's not. Anyway, whatever. Stop telling me there's something new. Is it the X weapon? It's telling me I can enhance his X weapon. Nope, it's still new. You're not Supreme Plus, Iron. What's new? What's new? Sorry, I'm having a meltdown about what's new on Iron. Anyway, when you get the X weapon, especially like grouping up, but obviously Cecia will not cast straight away in a fight regardless. But he will group people up for Cecia's ultimate, which is quite nice. It works quite well in PvE, where you saw it. Just you're going to see it get used in a minute. That I'll show you in the Trial of Abyss, and also can be relatively okay in PvP if you don't have things like Carolina upgraded yet. And then in terms of other units that work really well with Cecia, there are a couple of maybe ones down here. Like for instance, we know Kruger's ultimate, which if you don't know what Kruger's ultimate does, he reduces enemy physical defense by 10%, and Cecia is all physical damage. It may feel like Cecia is magic damage, but she's a marksman and does primarily physical damage. So that's really nice for like increasing her damage in the Dream Realm, because otherwise her damage in the Dream Realm is quite bad. The other big synergy is Coco. Her ultimate, when she actually grants the life drain and attack to Mr. Carlisle, which makes him a bit of a monster in the backline. So it's just worth noting that also Coco is a very good synergy with Cecia, and you'll often see that run together in certain situations too. So Cecia can be run with Coco, and I've actually seen some Trial of Abyss floors get cleared with Cecia and Coco as a primary combo alongside Rowan as well. So those are some of the synergies that work really well with Cecia as an individual. So I am actually going to show you her in the Dream Realm. What I would say is that she's not the best Dream Realm hero in the game, but viable at the very least, which is important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop out Corin here. I'm going to put Cecia in. Just thinking about who I actually want to take the heat from. Basically, this guy has an instant kill bubble, so it is quite nice to have the extra revive on Thorin. But what I want to run is Coco, because Coco will give me extra damage, which is quite nice. I don't really want to drop Odie. I don't want to drop Thorin. I mean, maybe I drop Marily, but she does do a lot of damage. Yeah, for the purposes of this, let's just say that you don't have Marily at a good level, so we're going to run Cecia instead. And this is what we're going to run as a primary. We're going to keep Odie in just for the damage. You could also run Corin, Kruger here, but he's also quite low level for me, so he'll probably just get one shot. So Cecia, works really well with Coco. You do need to make sure that Cecia casts before Coco casts, which is often a bit of a problem. So in this case, we do get the Cecia cast off and watch Coco. She's going to grant all of her ultimate benefits to Mr. Carlisle, and he is going to start ripping through in terms of damage. Now, Cecia is not a born and bred damage dealer for the Dream Realm. She is very much about AoE. She's not about a single target. There are much better single target heroes in the game, but if you have a highly ascended Cecia, you are not going to be struggling by having her in the Dream Realm, because she does get a big benefit from things like Coco. Like I said, she will do a lot of damage regardless. Hilariously, I think I might even beat my current daily max with Cecia because she is just more highly ascended than some of my others. And we have Mr. Carlisle still going for it in the front line here. It's going to be close. I'm going to get close to my my damage where I was using some of the better ones in the game. But Coco, and you see in the Coco and Cecia synergy, it is just very, very strong. I think I got close to my best. Not quite my best. You'll see that my best is, well, I almost matched my best. I must have been so close to matching my best right there at 34 million. And I used Cecia, and I didn't use Marily, and I didn't use Corin. And that is a benefit of just having Cecia highly ascended there. I actually should have gone back and had a look at the damage that was done. Do you know what? I'm going to do it again, just because we were quite close. Maybe. Yeah, go on then. Let's just do it again. I want to look at the damage that Cecia actually does here. Just need to you have to be in a situation where Cecia does cast before Coco. So Cecia has cast before Coco here. If Coco casts before Cecia, you lose out on that crucial first buff on Mr. Carlisle, which does prove to be a bit of a problem. We run Thorin here because, like I said, good old Mr. Frogger, Mr. King Croaker, does this like instant kill bubble attack. So basically, he places a bubble on someone and they just instantly die at the end of the bubble. That's why Thorin's really good, because he revives several times. He hasn't got any more revives left, which is fine. Smokey has managed to heal up Cecia for the time being. Coco goes through again. We were, some good RNG away from beating my daily damage total, and I had used people like Corin and Marilee, who were some of the better Dream Realm units in the game, but that just shows you how big Ascendancy is in terms of what it provides for your team. Let's go, guys. Let's go. We are close to doing it. It's Smokey's still alive. We have just beaten our daily thresholds. We've beaten our daily total with Cecia in the Dream Realm. It just shows you she's still very good. I've got up 5 ranks from doing that. You will see that the majority of the damage came from Smokey. From Odie, he's very good, and a lot of damage came from Smokey, but not an unrealistic amount of damage coming, or not like a poor amount of damage coming from Cecia in this situation. Was relatively decent. So just worth noting that Cecia can do very well. What I will do is I'll do the same thing again, but let's instead just put Marilee in. Now I'm anticipating this might even do better, but we did obviously have the faction bonus from Cecia and Thorin, which I talked about earlier, but I'm going to put Marilee in just to see, because she's technically better single target DPS. But what I want to see is what the overall damage ends up looking like with Marilee, with the Coco buff, obviously, but also having lost that faction bonus and having another good single target DPS on my side. But I beat my daily total with Cecia, which I was struggling to do beforehand, which is very nice. Smokey is massive as well. If you get Smokey to Mythic Plus, you see the blue aura that he gives off, that actually deals quite a significant amount of damage to the boss. He's actually a pretty good Dream Realm unit in that case. So good thing that Marilee didn't die here. We're doing a lot of damage. The only thing that I would say is we no longer have another melee threat with Mr. Carlisle, so we might end up dying a bit more quickly. Got 24 seconds. I think we actually will be. If we don't die, I think we will beat our target. Got 19 seconds. So someone is going to get bubbled in that time. Yeah, we're going to beat our target here with Marilee. But nonetheless, still a relatively good performance using Cecia. And I'm, considering that she's not supposed to be a Dream Realm target, I've only just beaten it by, again, another million by using Marilee in this instance. Gone up to rank 26. Got one more rank. So yeah, Marilee basically almost doubled Cecia's damage, which shows you how good she is on a single target situation. But it's the difference of 1 rank for me in this case. And for a lot of you, you'll find that if your Cecia is your highest ascended unit, she's still going to be decent in the Dream Realm. Like, it's the difference of 1 million damage overall, like 35 million to 36 million essentially. So it is just worth noting that she's still decent in this. She's still okay. She's not the best. She's not going to be the best. She's not designed for single target, but she can still be very viable in the Dream Realm and still support you and do well. Right, here is one of these situations where they've basically got 5 squishy units. I mean, Chippy, he is mythic, and Gaiwin is technically a tank, but this is one of those situations where I might need to slightly move things around here, but this is one of those situations where running Cecia kind of makes sense, because we're going to group them up with Iron, and then we're going to run Rowan. Cecia should get a really, really nice ultimate out here. So Rowan's going to go. We're going to get another group up. We're going to get, hopefully, Florabelle casting, which she does. She knocks them up, and there goes the Cecia cast. Really, really nice. Entangles everyone on the back line. Made quick work of floor 100 in the Trial of Abyss. So there are still situations where, and look, frankly, if I had a Carolina, she would do the same thing here. But what I'm saying is that there are still situations where Cecia makes sense to run, And this is another situation here, although there is a Sylvina, which is going to be a little bit annoying. So we're going to put Iron potentially to take the Sylvina. Yeah. There's going to be situations where Cecia is still going to feel useful. I mean, what Sylvina does do. What I do like about Cecia is she will stop Sylvina doing a huge amount of damage by using the Entangling Thorns. Although Sylvina has just completely wrecked my entire backline. Hopefully, yeah, we get a couple of potions which work out. Nice. Sylvina's actually dead this time. Now we just need to get enough time for our Cecia to cast. So our Cecia hopefully casts now. It just happens. Cecia does cast. Actually pulls Paris's ult the wrong way. And yeah, do you know what was really useful in this fight as well? Hammy gets entangled, and then obviously Odie does the legwork here, but Cecia's ultimate was really useful for pulling a Parissa ultimate away and completely entangling the backline. So there are just some instances where it is still very viable to use Cecia at the decent... I mean, look, I'm not going to kid anyone and say that floor 100 is considered massive late game, but, you know, I'm ranked 21 on my server. I'm at floor 100, and obviously there are some mega whales pushing the super high floors, but I'm at floor 100. It's through most of the game content that we have available to us, and Cecia is still getting used. So I just want to make it clear that, you know, even though a lot of people will tell you Cecia will fall off in the late game, she still has her uses, and you shouldn't feel bad about putting resources into her. Like I said, if you really want to min-max, then obviously, put down Carolina early on, fob off Cecia, drop Carolina into your comps, but what you will find is that you'll probably progress a little slower. That's okay. You don't need to win the game. The objective of AFK Journey is not to just win the game. There is always going to be things for you to do. And actually, when you get to my stage and you've completed all the AFK stages, you've no longer got the story. You know, it actually becomes a little bit less like an active game. But Cecia will carry you through the game more readily than Carolina will. Carolina kind of needs a specific comp to work, and one of the good things about Cecia is that she can slot into a lot of comps. Obviously, Rowan is her best pairing, and comps that generally layer CC are going to help with Mr. Carlisle, but she's still useful. She can slot into pretty much any comp. Thorin is a primary tank for most comps. So obviously Cecia is a Graveborn, so you've got a good Graveborn synergy going on with one of the best tanks in the game. There is a lot of reason to keep using Cecia in the late game, but she is primarily used when there are low defense targets, and AoE damage is absolutely paramount. And you saw in the Trial of Abyss floors here, there is floors where Cecia shines and floors where Cecia is just not going to do as well. But that is the case with pretty much every hero at the later stages of the game. There are obviously good comps, and if you go on any of these records and have a look at which one pulled them through, almost everyone is using some kind of Mauler cheese comp, which, by the way, I'm just letting you know, Antandra is in almost all of these. In a lot of them, Antandra is also either Mythic or Legendary Plus. Antandra with Mythic Weapon X level 5, Antandra, even just at Epic Plus, Antandra at Mythic. So I'm just saying, people who shat on me for saying that, you know, you shouldn't think about pulling Antandra or leveling up Antandra, she is a good A-tier Mauler hero. This is completely irrelevant to this video. I'm just getting salty at some comments that I had the other day. She is a good A-tier Mauler hero. Not as good as Coco, not as good as Odie, but she's a solid third choice and a great off-tank. So I'm just putting that out there. But Cecia still can be useful in these later stages of the game, and I'm using her to progress Trial of Abyss relatively well. So that is my advice with kind of like thinking about putting in resources into Cecia. It is perfectly okay to do so.